Well, I hope you found that piece of music helpful and gave you time to consider what it meant for Jesus to choose humility over status. And now let's go with him to that Garden of Gethsemane, the garden on the side of the Mount of Olives, overlooking Jerusalem. I'm going to read from Luke chapter 22, starting at verse 39, and listen out for what it cost Jesus to be that humble servant. Here we go. Luke chapter 22, starting at verse 39. Jesus went out as usual to the Mount of Olives, and his disciples followed him. On reaching the place, he said to them, "Pray that you will not fall into temptation." He withdrew about a stone's throw beyond them, knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, take this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." An angel from heaven appeared to him and strengthened him. And being in anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat was like the drops of blood falling to the ground. When he rose from prayer and went back to the disciples, he found them asleep, exhausted from sorrow. "Why are you sleeping?" he asked them. "Get up and pray so that you will not fall into temptation." I wonder if you noticed the first thing that it cost Jesus as he prayed in that garden, choosing to be the servant. It was there in verse 42. I wonder if you spotted it. He entirely set his will, his comfort, his life to one side and willingly carried out God his Father's will. It's not that God the Father was being cruel to his son by making him do something he didn't want to do. Not that he was putting his son through something that Jesus really was not willing to do. He was willing to do this. Remember that Jesus chose to come to earth as a man. He chose servanthood, and he knew before the beginning of time exactly what that was going to involve. He chose to humble himself to death, even death on a cross. But it was nevertheless Jesus putting aside his own position for the benefits of others. It cost him his position. And we, if we're trusting him, are his beneficiaries. What cost him has benefited us immeasurably. How? Well, because he chose to drink that cup that he taught about. "Father, if you are willing to take this cup from me," he prayed, "but not my will, but yours." This was no ordinary cup. It wasn't a cup of tea or even a cup of water or anything like that. This was the cup overflowing with the unimaginable bitterness of God's wrath at human sin. A cup that, without Jesus, one day we would all be required to drink ourselves. One day? Yes, one day. When we die and meet God face to face. We will see Jesus. What will he say to us? Will he say, "I drank the cup for him. I drank the cup for her"? And if that's the case, we'll be welcomed into God's loving arms and into his presence in the new creation forever and ever. Or will Jesus say, "No, I'm afraid the cup is still full. This person never came to me and handed me their cup." And we'll have to drink it ourselves in that case and face the full fury of God's anger at our lifelong rejection of him. Jesus drank that cup for all of us who have turned to him in repentance and faith. Are you one of those people? You really do need to be. If so, then why not hit pause now and spend a few moments thanking Jesus for what he's done for you by drinking that cup for you. But if you haven't yet come to Jesus, If you recognise that you've been going your own way in life and that with little regard, if any at all, to Jesus, then I wonder if you can see how important it is to turn back to him, to turn to him maybe for the very first time, even today. None of us know when we're going to die, do we? And goodness me, there's been enough of it in the news, and there continues to be enough of it in the news, and there will be for some time yet. It's right there, isn't it, in our midst? Death is there. And none of us want to face God and have to drink the cup of his wrath ourselves. But the good news is that you don't have to. When Jesus became a servant, he became your servant, holding out his hand, being ready and willing to drink the cup of God's wrath for you, so that you never have to face God's anger. Isn't that just remarkable? Will you let him do that if you haven't done already? The second cost to Jesus becoming a servant is there in verse 44. He prayed so hard for the strength to carry out his mission that his sweat was almost like drops of blood falling to the ground. I don't know whether you've ever been in a life or death situation, a real one. You might have been. But if not, think about hospital dramas where the lives of others depend on the work of the medics. Or think about what's really going in hospitals around the world right now. Doctors and nurses working their guts out to save people who they don't know but deeply, deeply care for. Now ratchet that up an unimaginable number of times and put that care, that grief, that sorrow, that concern into the heart of the one and only Son of God, who knows all of us by name and deeply cares about all of us, and was willing to go to the cross and drink that cup for us. Put that sorrow into his heart and imagine what that would have been like for him. We can't even get there, can we? And friends, he did that for you and for me. His sorrow, his work was so big, so hard, so deep that his sweat was like drops of blood. It cost him emotionally an unimaginable amount. Will you give him thanks for that this Easter? The third cost is in verses 45 and 46. Jesus had to do this alone. He was the only one who could do it. He alone can take away our sin. He alone can drink the cup of God's wrath for us. None of us is strong enough. Not even his disciples who'd been with him for 3 years, face to face with the divine Son of God. Not even they were up to the mark when it came to staying even with Jesus. Even they fell asleep under the weight of the sorrow of the situation. Jesus, being our servant, cost him his companionship at this point. At his greatest point of need, he was left alone. But he was willing to do that out of love for you and for me. What a remarkable Jesus he is. Well, I want to leave it there for today. There'll be a few questions to think about a little bit later on. And if you have time, come back tomorrow and there'll be a slightly longer edition of From the Vicar's Study where we'll be thinking about Jesus' death on the cross. But do hang around here and follow the service through, and there'll be some questions to take away at the end.